violence can come from absolutely any community, pretty much. I mean, even Buddhists, you know, when riled up in certain parts of the world, can become violent. The Quakers, I think, we can't go for, but but pretty much every community. So I accept that. This is not something to be picked up on. But Islamic extremism only comes from the Islamic religion and from followers of it, and that is an imported problem for Europe. That's a problem that we've brought in and we're now facing. Now, none of our politicians, by the way, and there's no great conspiracy about this, nobody expected it. If you'd have said to a politician in the 1990s, in the early years of the 2000s, Europe is going to be racked by blasphemy debates, they'd say, what are you talking about? When did the Spanish Inquisition return? And then we all became used to it, that there were certain things you couldn't do that were actually blasphemy in a country like this and were punishable effectively by death, by a death sentence. We all accepted that. And now we're told we have to accept the terrorism. Well, maybe we do have to accept the terrorism as part of our life, but the publics have a right to be looking at the politicians and saying, look, this is a problem you brought in. It's not only to be talked about. It's not only to be talked about as a problem, but unless we're willing to do that bit of identifying, to my mind, the gap between what the public can see and what the public know, and what the political class is even willing to whisper, will continue to grow, and that's the gap where you have to worry.
So who wants to take on what, or just a moment ago rather, that somehow this is a problem that has been brought into Europe by, I presume, Douglas means the immigration of Muslims in big numbers?
There's no doubt that when you look at the Muslim world in general, there are lots of problems. We have enormous problems with regards to women's rights, LGBT rights, freedom of speech, human rights, and we got lots of things that we should be criticizing, and we are criticizing. But it would also be a very big mistake to think that the Muslim world is a monolithic whole and that all Muslims are similar and they have a similar worldview. In fact, they do not. There are enormous differences. There always were, historically, and today as well, depending on whom you talk to, which country, what time you are focusing on. The differences are amazing. My worry is extremists in one place are creating more extremists elsewhere. Whether we like it or not, we are all far too globalized to think that by closing our doors and surrounding ourselves by walls, we will be safe and away and removed from all these problems. We won't. We're all of us in this together. It is a massive, terrorism is a big international global problem, and it can only be solved through global solidarity. With regards to the burkini ban in France, I sincerely believe it was very, very wrong. It was a big mistake. I think we should be criticizing faith-based schools, we should be criticizing extremist preachers, we should definitely monitor what people are saying in the mosques, but for God's sake, chasing women who are just wearing their burkinis in the beach, that is not the way forward. And it's even more dangerous because what's happening is, and this is not what we perhaps are not aware of much, those pictures, do you remember the picture of one lady wearing a burkini in France and 3 French policemen by her? Unfortunately, that very photograph has been circulated in Turkey, in Jordan, in Egypt, with awful captions saying, you see, this is what they're doing to our women.
All staged, with a TV crew called upon just to take the picture.
This is very dangerous.
The Catholic nuns are dressed the same way with a burkini,
okay.
and you allow them to dress like that. Why do you go after? This is crazy.
Can I suggest
Douglas,
something? May I suggest something?
Can I just finish just
okay,
one
yeah, Elif, I cut you off before, so we'll let you finish now. Yeah, and then
I come from a country, because Turkey and France have lots of similarities. The laicite we have borrowed directly from France, not the Anglo-Saxon secularism. And Turkey has applied the headscarf ban. Iran has applied the headscarf ban. It didn't work. It created massive problems. But yes, we all share the same aims with regards to how do we prevent extremism, how do we prevent terrorism, but let's also find more progressive ways forward than chasing women with burqinis.
Douglas.
First of all, sorry, Elif, but the burkini ban is a massive diversion. A massive diversion. It was a big mistake for the French state when that happened, I agree, but this is not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is that just up the road, again, a few days ago, 3 men with machetes went through a London street hacking at people saying this is for Allah. Okay? That's our problem. And this is always the way with this. We always have diversions, and some of these diversions we bring upon ourselves. But let me just get back to the main point. We have had historically massive issues in Europe. Nobody who knows anything about our history wouldn't pretend that. But this is a civil war within a religion which was not our war, and it has become our war. It has become our war, and Elif, you are right and wrong. You are totally wrong to say that there isn't some agreement on this. If you are a Muslim and you follow Islam, you believe that the Quran came from God, and you believe that what is in it is at least very hard to run against. And so now we have a situation in a country like this one, where actually the majority of British Muslims want being gay, like I am, to be made illegal now, okay? So we had a nice liberal agreement in recent decades over being gay, and now you import a community which actually thinks not just that they're not on board with gay marriage, but they think it should be made a lock-upable offence. Where does that come from? It comes from Islam, okay? Where do all these things have? They come from this, and I'm sorry, but it is a much worse problem than we think. Okay, one poll last year showed that 50% of British Muslims would not go to the police if they knew somebody involved in an ISIS-like group was around them. Another poll showed 2/3 of British Muslims saying they would not go to the police if they knew somebody involved in extremist activity. What the hell are we doing? What the hell are we doing in ignoring that?
Okay, Douglas, let me...
Yeah, but this is so unfair.
I know, Elif. I will.
This problem and a possible solution. See who the most vilified people in the Muslim community in this country, they are the reformers. Every single case, it's the reformers. Okay? And one of the London Bridge attackers last year attacked an imam who's a friend of mine in London. Okay? Everybody knows this. The reformers are on the edge of this. And this is the point.
Okay.
The reformers may lose. And that used to be a big tragedy for the Islamic world. And now it's a tragedy for Britain.
Okay. Elif wants to come in and then we're going to questions. Quick response from you and then we must hear from our audience. Yeah.
I think it's really unfair. I mean, what makes us think that all of us, we are incredibly worried about what's happening, and I believe all of us want to find a solution forward. It's only how we're going to find a solution. That's what we are debating. I never said that, you know, this was not an essential thing. I moved to England, and maybe, you know, when you are an outsider, when you are a latecomer, you appreciate it even more. You love it even more. So that's a different thing. But what I'm trying to say is we're so used to having these debates on both sides of the Atlantic. When you bring one speaker who criticizes Islam and then another speaker who defends Islam, and they keep fighting and quarreling, I've never liked that. Sure. I never wanted to be part of that. I'm not even a believer myself, you know. But I'm someone who is interested in dialogue, in peace, in faith, and I do note that the way forward is not by generalizing communities. The biggest problem we have today is how do we communicate with people who are not necessarily in this room? How do we find the same language? How do we reach out to girls, boys who do, yes, some of them come from conservative families, and yes, indeed, we must stop these fanatics, extremists. But if in doing so, we generalize all Muslims, I'm very worried that we are adding fuel to the fire of extremism.